Okay, I think that's about it. We will not keep everyone else waiting. So we are going to start our much awaited highlight of the day. We also have our experts here on my left already. I have Cash and Shini. So maybe you want to just quickly introduce yourselves, just pass the mic voluntarily.
Hi, my name is Cash. I'm from Studio 3, and I'm an interior designer. I do a bit of everything. I wouldn't call myself a specialist in residential projects, but we do commercial projects, we do residential projects. Basically, we do whatever that requires good design. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Cash. And we have Shini. Yes. Oh, I think so. Let me just check. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Shini from VSQ Interiors, and I have been in this line since 2012. My work is mainly on residentials, unlike Cash, where he's the king of commercials and residentials.
I would say king lah.
So my forte is more on residentials. Yep.
May not know so much about home design and how to pave our way around it. Maybe how to work with a budget, how to be creative, and maybe other tips and tricks from you guys.
Sure.
So I am very aware of the time factor, and everyone wants to go shopping. So we're gonna get right into it and not waste anyone's time. So let me just pull out the first question for our experts. Yeah. So I'm going to open this to either one. Okay, the first one. What are some of the lesser known or often overlooked aspects of home design that can significantly impact the overall aesthetics or functionality of the space? So I guess what actually impacts the functionality and aesthetics that maybe normal people don't often think about, lesser think about things?
Shini, I let you start first.
I think for that question, it's actually a very wide-ended answer. If you like to streamline it down, you need to look at it as per space basis. Besides the aesthetic value, besides then the pretty picture that you get from design, how you work the entire space is very important. So you can look at it from your color scheme, from your planning, your space planning. So it's actually a very wide answer for that question, if you ask me. It all depends on the ID and how he or she visualizes the space, and according to the concept and theme. Only from there you are able to navigate all the rest. Do you resonate with that?
No, I think when you say overlooked, right, it's not necessarily like a specific type of scope of work in the project, like curtains or flooring. I think in a way, like latching on Shini's point, an overlooked aspect of consulting an interior designer is you as the client should know what kind of designer you're looking for. I think there is a misconception that clients assume that you can use any designer. In a way, it's like choosing your clothes. Like, you know your brands that you like. You know the kind of silhouettes or the fits that you like. So same with designers. You sort of need to choose designers that you like, their body of work that you resonate with, and that would, I would say, create a better relationship throughout, and then you get an outcome that both parties are satisfied. So it's an overlooked aspect, because a lot of customers assume as long as I pay you the premium, I can get what I want. That's not really the case. What are you looking for? So different designers cater to different outcomes and different aesthetics, different approach, and different expertise. Like Shini, she's really good with a certain style of rustic and very warm style of interior design for homes. Whereas my style of design is a bit more, I wouldn't want to use the word minimal, but it's a bit more, I guess, less cluttered in mind, and I'm not a maximalist in nature, so I guess my execution is a bit more on the minimal design, because I saw a piece of paper here that says, what's your biggest renovation regret? It says minimalist, right? So I think when you commission a designer or you engage a designer whose style is somewhat of a minimalist palette, you're gonna get a minimalist design. So the customers or the clients should, it's a relationship. So they need to sort of build their understanding on who the designers they are engaging with.
The concept is very important, if I may add so. From the beginning of a good design, it's not so much of the work, it's not so much of the physical work, it's the preliminary works where an ID and a client sits together. Because sometimes there are things in design that the client do not see it from the ID point of view. So before we go into like what the question was posing just now, it's very important that we streamline and determine whether the client understands the concept or whether it's driving with what the ID brings to the table.
You want to know if you can vibe.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I think that's maybe that's that's a good way to like define it. An overlooked aspect of engaging with designers is, do you vibe with the designers? You know, it has to be a harmonious relationship, because you're going into, depending on the project, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. Some projects can go up to a year or 2. So you gotta have a frequency that you guys match. And when you have a great relationship with your designer, and vice versa, we with our clients, you get a result of design that is really amazing and fulfilling for both parties.
It's a two-way street, just like
It
any
is.
other relationship.
Yeah.
It's either a good marriage or a bad marriage.
Could end in a very ugly divorce,
Yeah.
or just a project that you're not happy with.
I always tell my clients that, like, when we first meet and they list down their expectations and things, I always start with, like, I'm not a magician. Like, I'm a designer. I'm just a human man. Like, I cannot do something just because you want it and just because you pay us a fee. Like, I can try my best to understand, but you have to understand that, again, like what Shini is saying, the preliminary aspect, where we understand each other's wavelengths, we understand each other's style, philosophy. It's something that is a build-up that you need to establish.
Absolutely. I think you make solid points, and for a very wide and difficult to answer question, right? This is not something that we can give like a top tip or anything to just, drill down into it. I think the message that we can all take away from this is that it's very important to focus on it being a two-way street, because like you say, you're not a magician.
Yeah.
And if you vibe, if you align in your goals and your principles, then see, the minimalist wouldn't be that answer over there on the biggest renovation regret. It'll be on the other side, which, by the way, there was Cash. So, there are people not everyone's gonna like the same style. So that's the message here. So I think we've got to do our part. After all, client is paying the money. They don't want the money go to waste. Same for you. You don't want your time to go to waste for a project that is not being appreciated. So I think the message is quite clear here on question 1. The overlooked part is actually to spend a little bit more time on establishing that relationship, that alignment, before we jump straight into the work and spend 6 months, 1 year.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe just to add on to that before we move on to the second question, is there a single biggest purchase that a client usually asks for, in the early stage?
Oh, sorry, what do you mean?
A single biggest purchase that a client asks for that you think makes a big impact, maybe to this whatever style that they choose.
Oh yes, I think if I may answer, if I may take that question first, and this is where the blunder happens as well. Usually in what the clients will rush into getting when they buy a new home, or be it a commercial, if they're going to build a F&B establishment or whatever, they will immediately focus their funds, their budget, and their whole aesthetic value on soft furnishings, which I think that is not necessarily the right way how to go about it. You don't start with soft furnishings. Yes, that matters. Yes, that completes the whole aesthetic, but it's not your first purchase. So what they do is they neglect all the other things, all the other important factors in building a residential or building and designing a residential or commercial, by just going in and buying that beautiful 40,000 sofa, whereby and then struggling with the budget at the end of the day, you know, because the budget has to be allocated for so many other items when you're building a space. Like I always tell Cash, before you open that beautiful turquoise blue Tiffany box, the box matters, right? The content is secondary. So when we build a residential or a commercial, everything has to be in order first. The walls, what's behind the walls, the finishing, and then come your non-permanent items, which is the furnishing and all. So concentrate and bring your value to what matters and what is permanent, and everything else will flow along the way.
I mean, I don't have, because you said what are the first thing that they jump into in terms of a big purchase. I guess my clients usually don't jump for big purchases. I don't really experience that, because they're very reserved with spending immediately. But I think, yeah.
I think it's more on residential.
Yeah, perhaps. But Shini's right in the sense that it's very important that when you hire a consultant, you are spending money on consultants to provide you with design solutions, right? So, of course, it's very exciting when you engage with a designer because, they've been thinking about a particular object or furniture or design piece that they can't wait to explore. So they do have that allocated already, right? But what Shini is trying to highlight, which I think is very important, is that a designer provides design solutions. So when you, if you're talking in the context of a residential project, you want to cater to solving the issues of the house, whether the kitchen is not functioning well enough, the circulation of the bedroom is too congested, or the storage space is insufficient for the entire household. So bringing your attention and your investment into figuring out pragmatic solutions first should be the priority. And then comes the aesthetic value, because you couldn't solve the design issues. That's why you hired an expert, right? So let us prioritize that first, and then see from those solutions explored, what is left of the budget. You know, before we start buying a 40,000 mahogany dining table, maybe that 40,000 should be focused more on carpentry, because you don't have enough storage space, you know?
I really hope everyone heard that. I think this was really quality answers, because I think sometimes people have the conception or misconception that, but IDs would just spend the money. Of course, they won't really prioritize functionality. But hearing from both of your responses, you know, both you, Shini, and Cash.
I think if me and Cash sits here, if we keep sitting here, we can keep talking about this the whole day, because that's how much experience we have dealing with clients and all that when it comes to build. It's a very open-ended topic. It can go on forever.
But that's the thing though, like don't get us wrong, you know. If you have money to spend, we are happy to spend it for you. We are happy to choose beautiful things for you. But we have a responsibility to make sure that at the end of this relationship, you can enter a space that has been given the necessary design treatment that helps you improve your well-being. Or if it's like a house for a family, the family's well-being, you know. So we can get excited and, you know, buy expensive things that are redundant to solving the interior space. But I think as designers, the foundation of what we do is empathy. We care. We want to make sure that everyone is comfortable, children are safe, the elderly are being considered in terms of ergonomics. So those are key things that are not pretty. People don't, you can't romanticize those things, because that's why our experience and our education over the course of 15 years has allowed us to look at a space and see those things, you know?
Because from the time we get hired or we merge together with the clients, it's actually a relationship. If you really want to break it down, for the 6 months or for that 8 months that you're building their home or their, be it residential or commercial, you are in communication with them almost every day. So whether you like it or not, you are in both of each other's lives and spaces every day. So you tend to you tend to get very personal. Yes, everybody wants to say that you draw a line between professionalism or what. At the end of the day, it's just a client. It's not your home, but it's actually, if you look at it, it's actually a relationship.
Yes, absolutely. I think it again boils down to that basis of that relationship, because a lot of things, I think what you mentioned about making it the right fit for the client also depends on, there's only so much you can do from reading the client, and you can't read their minds. So there's only so much observation and asking can do, and it depends also on the client and how much they share with you. Or I think you pointed out the elderly, or making it safe for the kids. Just simple things like that. It's
Simple
probably
things that are overlooked but
Yeah.
are essential to the design outcome.
Yeah, and it's not on the designer, basically. I think the point that we're driving on is a two-way relationship. So the client needs to share. I think people tend to think of it as like, if it's a lawyer-client relationship, they think, oh, it's a fiduciary relationship. But it's not the same for designers. But no, it's the same. And I think that's a very good point that you guys drove across. And it makes a lot more, it puts a lot more meat into it when you share your own personal experience.
It justifies our consultation fee.
Yes. You guys heard it from them themselves, okay? I didn't say it. Okay, so we're moving on from that one to shift the gears a little bit to the technology aspect. We did the client aspect. We'll come back to that later, but it's obviously a really weighted topic. So maybe I'll shift it to the technology part of it. So technology is evolving. It's actually evolving really quickly, and smart home concepts are getting more and more common, right? So what are some insider tips that you have to integrate this technology into homes? Maybe also Cash, you can share also for commercial settings as well. Yeah.
Can I start with? Yeah. So I think I wouldn't say it's an insider tip, but technology is interesting, right? Because what's available out there is just a vast option for a lot of consumers now. So I wouldn't call it an insider tip, but I think a strategy or something that customers need to understand is whether or not smart home systems are something that's relevant to your lifestyle. If you ask me for my home, I don't think I need to just press a few buttons and all my lights are switched on. I'm perfectly fine with that. But looking at my lifestyle, my routine. So every morning when I wake up, the first thing I look for is fresh air. So I would open the curtains in my living room, and then I would open the curtains in my children's room. So if I were to integrate smart home systems in my house, at most it would be motorized curtains. So I can just access that from my phone and switch it open. So you don't necessarily have to get a smart home that does everything, because those things are not cheap. It's very expensive, and it can be quite complicated to use and utilize. So you need to look at what's your lifestyle and what's your routine like in your household for you to even consider what type of smart home systems that would be relevant for your household. So I think the key takeaway is don't overcomplicate things. Try to choose a system that is simple and easy for everyone to use, because the kids, they definitely can adapt to new systems. But for me and the slightly older people in the house, it can be quite complicated, So let's just try to not add more complication to our lives just because it's smart home,
It should make your life easier,
yeah,
not
it
harder.
should. Yeah. Have you
Also,
explored?
from my experience, technology changes at a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Every time you think you got the latest
Next week they
update,
got a new
the
one.
next week something else comes about.
Yeah.
So at what point do we put a stop to it, especially when it comes to residentials? Because at the end of the day, what I've noticed is some clients actually go overboard, and not only clients, actually some IDs, because they just want to apply what's the latest in the market. So they literally just furnish the whole residential with smart home system that is not necessarily great for their lifestyle in the house. So you want to choose a smart home system that is user-friendly, like what Cash said earlier, that is going to work for all the people in the house, and not just because it's the latest in the market, and not just because someone else has it and you need to have it. At the end of the day, residential is still a home. So you want to avoid making it too complicated. At the end of the day, especially after the pandemic, what I noticed, if I may say so, while everybody has gone back to normalcy, there is also quite a number of people still working from home. So when I say still working from home, most of them prefer your natural light coming in and everything to be a little bit more user-friendly and all. So just by having the latest smart home system does not necessarily do you good.
Does not necessarily improve your life. You know, you have to be selective with how you, like I said, run your household.
Yeah, yeah. It's so customizable. It's so subjective.
But technology is very interesting in terms of how it can improve your lifestyle. So there are certain, I wouldn't call it smart home systems, but there are certain new systems introduced, like there are some in the roadshow, like for example the iTricks or something like the water.
Yes,
Yeah,
the
so there are
water.
interesting new technology that can be introduced into our homes that can definitely improve your overall experience.
Providing solutions to, well, problems you didn't know you had. And then
Exactly.
suddenly you're like, oh, I could
Yeah.
save space now.
Yep.
I could be a bit faster.
Exactly.
I think on that note, right, because there's clearly too much options and too much trends, so people get sucked into it. Maybe what's a popular request you get based on this technology question? What's the most popular request you get for this smart home enhancement? And maybe is there a tip you would share? Maybe like a note, a forewarning. Be aware, make informed decisions before you decide on this.
I guess this is applicable to anything that you want to invest on. It's not always going with top of the line. You don't always have to go for the most expensive thing out there, whether it's smart home system or whether it's furniture brands or whatever it is for your home reno. You don't have to go for the most premium option. You should go with the option that caters to you, that you and your consultant has both sort of established. This is more suited for you, your personality, your budget, your expectation. You know, so the tip I would give is understand the products and options out there, understand why they are charging a certain price, and then make a informed decision with your consultant's advice.
Right, so there's just a lot. What my take from there is that there's just a lot out there, so many options. It's impossible to cover everything, but your consultants are the experts, so leverage on them, leverage on their skills, leverage on what you pay them for, leverage on their experience, trust them, and then share with them what you want, and then align separately. So there's really no quick way to say, what's the top thing I should request for, where should I start?
It just needs to work with the lifestyle in the house. If you just keep it true to that, I think it should be okay. It's just, you gotta just get what works for you. Not every single step has to have light popping up everywhere, you see? Yeah, so it just needs to work with you.
That's actually one of the renovation regrets too, or one of the regrets that I saw, yeah, of rushing into trends. So yeah. So very, very relevant. Okay, so I think we covered on technology. I think we touched a little bit, alluded to the next question a little bit. The next question is involving home design secrets with a play on visual illusions. So can you reveal a technique that you use, or that you like to use, to make a space appear larger or cozier than it actually is?
Can I jump into this? I think visual illusions are something that you explore a lot more in commercial type projects, because you don't want to have illusions in your home. I think that can be quite scary, right? So like I said, I do quite a handful of commercial projects. So commercial project tends to touch more on conceptual experiences, but this can be applied in home interior if you like, but don't underestimate. So the tip I'm gonna share is do not underestimate the interesting aspect using mirrors that can do to a space. You know, it creates so much interesting play on scale, depth, perspective. So the introduction of mirrors into a space, no matter how large or small, can add so much interesting dynamic to a space. You know, like for dining room, for example. So I'm just trying to jump into a more residential context. You know, maybe Shini can add on to this. You know, for me personally, I like introducing mirrors into into a dining space, because I like how it interacts with the users of the space, especially a formal dining space, when it's full with people. So it creates this really interesting energy when the space is filled, and then these mirrors sort of interact with the users. And designers can come up with very interesting ways to frame up these mirrors, whether it's a simple mirror, whether it presents itself in a more intricate or complex way. So whatever it is, you know, using mirrors can really create a nice illusion of space and depth into a simple dining room. Have you explored that in your designs?
Mirrors is actually interesting, Akash.
Yeah.
I mean,
Interesting in bedrooms as well,
yeah.
if you like.
Okay, if, while Cash just gave us his feedback, I mean his brilliant answers on his mirrors, and also I tend to use a lot of lighting and dimmers. Lighting and dimmers to me makes or breaks the entire space. Like you can have the most beautiful, gorgeous panels, and you can have tall ceilings or whatever, but if you do not use proper lighting, I don't believe it's going to bring out the best of the whole space. Like if you were to go and get high-end furnishings and get the most nicest panels on the wall, and you do everything right, but then you don't focus on your lighting. When you switch on your light, all of these elements are not going to stand out how it should be. So lighting is very important. Dimmers are very important, which comes back to the question that you posed earlier for home smart system, right? If there's anything that I will stand by in terms of your previous question, which is the home smart system, and this current question that you have, if you marry those two together, the basic home smart system that you should have is dimmers, very important, that obviously you can, you know, rewire it to your phones and all that. That would play a very big part in the whole soft furnishing. Mirrors, can you imagine how dimmers will look on the mirrors? If you have beautiful mirrors and then suddenly you can't control your lighting, you're not going to be able to get the wow factor.
Yeah, I think like what you're talking about in terms of illusion, right? So with dimmers, you can create multiple atmosphere and the setting or the tone of the space. You know, it can feel formal, it can feel informal. So introducing that into your living spaces or your lounge spaces or your dining spaces, you can play around with multiple moods. So I think, yeah, because Shini's background is exploring a lot of residential projects. I just introduced a dimmer in my house, right? Because I don't really use dimmers, and my wife insisted on using it, so I was like, okay, fine, right? But it does so much to the space, depending on what we're trying to do at the living space. You know, when we have a more close family or a more intimate setting, the dimmers allows us to create a totally different atmosphere, you know? So you don't have to light candles
It's
and
a
stuff
vibe.
anymore. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
always
yeah.
a vibe.
Yeah.
It's a vibe.
So it's, that's interesting.
I think putting them two together is something that, well, at least I haven't thought about. I wonder whether the others have, those who are in the crowd. But to me, that's really something new. It's a new concept. I mean, sometimes, you know, there's only so much Pinterest can tell you, right? Like, oh, use top tips.
But most of the images that you see on Pinterest also, it's all, if you really look at it, most of the lights are not brightest. They've actually dimmed it down to get that moody effect and all that. Now, you can't do that with just a switch of a, when you switch on your lights, because it doesn't do that.
It's very
so dimness
curated.
is very important.
You have to curate it, and I think designers would have the ability to curate lighting that best suits the expectation of the space.
And this again goes back to what we talked about earlier about that communication and that relationship, because something that the client may not think about, but if they tell you, oh, I want to curate different moods or different vibes, and then that's where these suggestions come in. Just on that point on residential, I'm curious to know, maybe I can start with you, Shini, just before we move on to the next question, because this question is about small space. So I was thinking, like, from a client's perspective, I'm sure there are clients who have small space, but they already live in it, and it's a mess or it's a clutter. How would you suggest, or maybe from your own personal experience, how did they go about that? What should their first step be?
You mean if I were to be given a challenge to design a residential from a small space, and nothing gets me going in my line with a challenge like that? Because before I go to answering your question, I was once given a 5 feet by 5 feet powder room to work with. And in that powder room, the ceilings were slanting because it was positioned under a stairways. And yet, I somehow managed to make it functional. Space-wise, it was perfectly working for an adult. So now coming back to answering your question, if you are given with a small space to design, the number one concept that I always apply is called the Japandi. Japandi deco.
Japandi,
yeah,
okay.
Japandi deco,
Scandinavian, okay.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Japandi deco, to me, is the best concept to apply in a small space because of its colors. It's warm, but yet it does not clutter the whole space. It's your traditional white oak finish, and it has tons of soft lighting to play around with, which means even if you have a narrow space, if you apply that concept carefully, curated carefully, that whole space will look just fine, because you look at many Airbnbs, everybody just fits everything into an Airbnb space. So for me, if you're working into a space, finalize your concept first. If your concept works with the space, everything else will work. Then, of course, your secondary, your hidden doors, your flush doors, and your colors, the choice of colors of the walls and all. But having said that, I am not the kind of person that will agree when you come and say that for small spaces, you must only use light colors. No such thing.
Yeah, same.
No such thing. I have applied
dark colors,
semi-dark, moody
and it
concept.
actually makes it better.
Yep, in a very small space, but it was still workable with the client. So again, coming back to the first question before, nail your concept before anything else happens.
And for me, and that's really great. I never consider like Japandi, as a stylistic strategy. My answer would be a bit more commercial design context, right? Because I do a lot of retail spaces, and the average retail space I work with is between 1,800 square feet to 3,000 square feet, right? So that's the average retail space of a boutique store. But sometimes I have clients who only have about 400 square feet of a space, and that's really, really, really small. So how I approach that with regards to your question, right, a smaller space, because this is 3 times or 4 times smaller than the usual retail experience that I have explored, is prioritizing what matters. So for speaking in terms of a retail space, I ask my client, what is important for your brand in this small space? Because you cannot have everything that you want in a 400 square feet space. So we need to talk about prioritization. What is key here? Is it the products? So whether it's storage, whether it's a focal point, whether it's a lounge space or whether it's the brand experience, what is it that you need to prioritize because you are limited with space? So understanding and establishing the priorities allows the designer to better propose a solution in that limited space. So if you're speaking from a powder room concept, you know, does the powder room need to have cabinet space? If it's just a sink and you don't even need WC, I don't know, there are some, you know, little hand wash areas. So establishing the priorities allows a better expectation on what the designer can propose, and then you'll have an outcome that is beautiful.
Keep it to your basics, but make that basics pretty.
Yeah.
Keep it to what is essential in the space, but make it look nice.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Don't be discouraged. Just go back to basics.
Yeah.
Think about what's your priority first. Like
Exactly.
with everything else in life,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then one step at a time. I think a lot of times people are just overwhelmed, right? And then they end up telling you, "I want everything."
It's
but you
good for
can't.
it's good for your soul as well. If you just stick to your basics and
Yeah,
just work
Marie
with what
Kondo
you need
it,
to
like
work
just
with.
shed the fat. Like what's not important, we can put this aside. When you have a larger space in the future, then we can explore those things. But for now, what's important, you know? It doesn't have to be everything.
Right. I think on that point, this small space, a lot of times people, besides not being able to start because they can't prioritize or it's just too messy, it's too overwhelming, I don't know where to start with my designer. I think the second question, most popular question that people would have is, what happens about the budget? Like, so I'll move on to the next question about budget. Sometimes budget constraints can be very challenging, right? So sometimes it's very challenging, and then creative and
Can I
underrated.
skip this question?
Cash, you
Let me-
have to
let me
take
try-
it.
let me try and answer.
Cash
So what's the-
answers budget.
What's
put
the
you on the
question?
spot.
Okay, what's the question?
Okay, the question is, what are some creative or underrated solutions that designers use to achieve a high-end look on a limited budget? So basically clients who have a budget constraint but still want to have a nice end goal. Maybe they still keep it basic, but they'll probably say like, I will still want a luxurious feel, but if you give me, you know, the quotation, I say it's out of my budget. Then
Okay, so I think this is where this kind of like panel sessions are very important, because let me try to speak on behalf of most designers or most good designers. Every designer or a design consultant that you commission will always have the client's best interests at heart. Simple as that. So we will never, I mean, like I said, this is speaking on designers, good designers, right? No designers want to suggest or propose materials, design, finishes that will not last, that will break, that would spoil, that would come off from the floor in 6 months' time. No designers would willingly want to do that. So let's establish that first, right? Second, when you say, oh, how do I design this space? I want it to look luxe, but I don't have the budget. So this is where a designer, or a good designer, would communicate expectations clearly. Like you cannot go, if your budget is to buy a Honda, but you want it to perform like a Lamborghini, it's not the Lamborghini's fault that you cannot come in with that budget and walk out the store with a Lamborghini.
That hurts.
I'm not saying I'm a Lamborghini designer. I'm just saying you have to manage expectations, and it's the designer's job to educate the customers that, look, your budget that you have brought to the table today would allow you a design outcome or a design experience that looks like this. And it's not a negative conversation here. This is about expectations. So if you have a certain budget, and what I would do usually when I have clients, let's speak in terms of residential, they have a budget that in my experience does not allow to cover the entire house. So what I tell the client is this: your budget, you have two ways. You have two options now. Whether you increase your budget because you're trying to cater to the entire house of 2 stories, you have 12 rooms, or we prioritize the rooms that matter with the budget that you've presented. So what you have is 6 rooms that are well designed with good materials and good finishes because of your budget constraint, or you increase the budget Or most people they try to do this. Can we still do it all with the budget? So what you have is 12 rooms that are, excuse my language, pretty shitty, right? And what's the point?
You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
No, actually,
Value added.
just to add on to what Cash said earlier, if you really have a budget constraint, I always tell my clients to put the budget where it matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else that is movable, that it's not going to hurt your move-in status, you can always do it much later. Get your ceiling sorted out, get your electrical, get your plumbing, do everything that you cannot see with your eyes. Sort everything out, get your basic all done for you to move in. And even if you don't have the budget this month to buy that so-called $40,000 sofa because you've spent the money to make sure your plumbings and your M&Es were all done perfectly well, you can always do it in the next coming months, because most of us designers here, we provide renderings for them, right? We provide renderings, and you can even just buy the sofa if you just follow the design, follow the color in the next coming month when you get a second phase of budget or something. But for the beginning stage of a renovation, design and build, concentrate your budget on what matters to the house. Don't just buy pretty little things without sorting out all the fundamentals, which is very important for you to move in. You imagine if you do not want to pay attention to all these details, there's no point you bringing such expensive furnishings into your space, and one day a leaking happens and everything else is destroyed. So budget goes there first, then everything else can come later.
I'm glad you actually brought up the point on structural parts, things that we can't see actually, because then that means that should still be the priority, the functionality, the safety, everything that goes in that, like you said, can't see, not movable. Maybe before we move on to the next one, just on one more point, just to play devil's advocate. Again, I'm merging two of your answers, Cash. So I choose to do all the rooms because I need to prioritize the things that I can't see. So they kind of look not so nice. And obviously, I don't have the budget for more. What can I do in the meantime? Would you ever advise, or would you ever support the decision to perhaps buy a cheaper home decor as a placeholder for interim, just to spruce up the place?
I personally don't believe in placeholding designs because it's a waste of money, right? But perhaps, I may come across a bit harsh by saying you can't do all the rooms, right? You can with a basic setup, because as long as you have a designer helping you develop this interior space, right, for your home, it may not look nice enough for Architectural Digest, but a basic setup with a limited budget, as long as it's curated by a designer, would still have the execution and considerations of aesthetic. So you can have, for example, you have a guest room that you didn't have the budget to spend on, right? Because most of the budget is being spent on the master bedroom. But I believe any good designer out there, if you're limited with the budget, they can still create a guest room that's simple, very low cost, but it's still tasteful. I think that's the word. Tasteful is still something that can be achieved. As long as you...
I think any designer will discourage the client if the client is going to go and buy items which is not up to a designer standard, because that would ruin the entire aesthetic. Can you imagine if your client decides to go against you and buy something which is so much visibly lower grade in quality, and then you have guests coming over to the house? Oh, by the way, who did your home? And I'm like, so and so did your home. Yeah, there goes.
We wouldn't want you to fill up the house with stuff that is cheap just so that you can fill it up. Like, we will try our best to advise you on selection of furniture, finishing that is up to a certain standard, but perhaps, we can choose the non-premium option, or we could reduce in the quantity,
I think that goes to show that's your experience speaking, that,
yeah.
you know, that's your years behind you speaking, that you can speak so confidently and comfortably about this, that what should be prioritized. And I think, in short, sustainability of things. You know, you have money to spend, you can use 10% of it on a placeholder, and it's not sustainable in the long term. Neither, on another flip side, reflects well on the whole outlook of what you work so hard for. Not just as your reputation as a designer, but more so for the client. Like Shini, you mentioned someone coming to your house and then the grading is just off. And that just nullifies what you spend so much for the place. So I think this alludes to the next question on sustainability that I'm curious to know your thoughts on. You know, nowadays there's a lot of sustainability talk for home designs, and actually even for commercial, because ESG is a big thing. So how would you suggest homeowners and maybe commercial owners to integrate eco-friendly elements to their spaces?
See, from the residential point of view, what we usually work with are usually
Test.
Okay, we're back, right? So from the residential point of view, I usually would recommend using a lot of clay items, and that is usually for your outdoor design, residential outdoor, how we bring in natural light from your outdoor and all that. So most of the residentials that I work with, I will choose one prime area in the whole layout where I focus on items that is, it works with whatever topic that you're talking with, sustainability and all that, right? So we will then produce that area where it gets natural light, natural rainwater, cordon off the area with beautiful blocks, you know, and plants and all that, and let that be that one element in the home. Having said that, I personally do not like to apply it everywhere around the home. I will choose a particular area, maybe a transition between the living to the kitchen, or from the kitchen to the wet kitchen, to the back, to the laundry area, where your natural light plays a part, just not piercing natural light into somewhere where it doesn't make sense. One area that I love to incorporate this is actually in the laundry area, because the laundry area, it's the bestest way how you can amp up your laundry area design, because it's usually in Malaysia with our erratic weather, right? Laundry area, and most homes today, they have designated laundry area. That's the best place where you can actually build up a beautiful brick wall with your blocks, you know, the ventilation blocks over there, natural light coming in, rainwater, and the place still looks pretty at the end of the day. That's one area I'll apply it.
I mean, speaking on sustainable design, it's a very complex subject. You know, a lot of greenwashing is out there where people just preach about sustainable design, endorse sustainable design, but it's not really something that has a sense of authenticity behind it. So I cannot speak on behalf of that, because I myself am still learning in trying to adapt more sustainable solutions in our work. But what I can say or share, you know, especially for consumers listening right now, is number one is about education, and knowing that actually almost every product out there, they do have a sustainable option or a sustainable catalog, but it's usually not in the forefront because either the limitation of the design options or from a price point, because it's a bit more expensive. But I think sustainability in design is something that really is focused on education and as well as behavior. So what I mean by that is it starts with your behavior and your routine in terms of applying sustainable design in your life. You know, like if you don't recycle and you litter and you don't actually care about nature and environment, if you don't have those very fundamental aspect of giving a damn about the environment, it's difficult to even talk about a sustainable material on the floor if you don't even practice sustainable design and caring about nature. So what I'm trying to advocate right now is informing ourselves about sustainability. That's actually lacking, rather than the product availability. Yeah. So if we can introduce that, and it's a responsibility from designers that we need to advocate that, we need to educate ourselves more on that, and then we need to try and explore it in our designs more. That's what we can do as designers. And for consumers, they need to sort of educate themselves on sustainable behavior in their lifestyles. Like I try to advocate that to my children, and hopefully once they've matured enough, they are able to articulate about sustainable designs and sustainable subjects, not just in design, but in science, in life, in infrastructure, in everything.
It's a constant learning process, and we are interior designers, and that's actually not our main core forte. But we are trying to incorporate it into this, so we are also learning as we go. So yeah, that's always a learning process to me.
It's something that's happening in the backdrop. It's a shift that happens at the back or the background, and then this is sort of an ancillary part of it, I would say. Then I think going from what you're saying, Cash, because you can't just totally change. The lifestyle is important, and I suppose this. I'm just thinking about a question now on minimalism, because that's like quite popular, right? But a lot of times, I mean, it ties into sustainability, how you want to be sustainable and minimalist, but you don't have that lifestyle. Is there a top tip you would help chaotic people start?
Sorry?
Chaotic people, non-minimalists.
How would you help chaotic people?
I
Sounds
wouldn't
like
call
my
it
brain.
chaotic. Chaotic sounds like they have a disorder.
Like
I
maybe-
think it's maximalist in terms
Yeah,
of design.
the proper term to use is maximalist. Chaotic
Because I can be chaotic at times.
We are all
Maybe
chaotic in our
Yeah.
profession.
I think, but that's the thing though. It goes back to our first point, in which when you engage with a designer, you need to find a designer that suits your personality. So like I have a brother, and his house, he's a maximalist. He likes a very rustic, broody, and very vintage-looking aesthetic, very mid-century. Whereas my house is very calming and very minimal. I don't like the word minimal, but very, a controlled, neutral palette. So when he comes to my home, right, he's like, "Oh, your house is so boring."
Okay.
Right, and he's not a designer. He's a physicist. So he comes to my house and says, "Bro, your house is boring." I'm like, "But I'm a designer. How can you say that to me?" Right? But it's preference, and you can't blame them.
Yes,
So
yes.
it's important to find designers that can cater to that sort of maximalist design outcomes.
I should correct myself. Apologies to anyone who's called chaotic. I actually came up with a question from myself.
Oh no, don't. I mean, most of the clients, they won't even know the proper term to use. We are the one who break it down. So yeah.
Maybe
you a maximalist?
I'll rephrase my question.
Right.
Yes, my question is actually also from my personal perspective, that not really on a maximalist part, but more of a minimalist wannabe. It's not that you like, so I'm speaking from a perspective of someone who perhaps does not like the maximalist lifestyle, but somehow got sucked into it. That's why I said chaos, because clutter takes over your life, and then soon you just can't break away from it. But you think that perhaps a change of interior design can help to lead your change in lifestyle. So that's why you request for perhaps a minimalist overhaul.
But having said that, not all clutter is bad clutter, lah. I mean, I'll be very honest with you, because you have clutter and then you have clutter item that means something to you. So there is, when you say you like that minimalistic approach, you like the look, you see it on Pinterest, you see it everywhere, but when you go back home, all of the items you just can't part with,
Yes.
right? So, but at the same time, you want it to look neat. So there is this whole thing I apply, because I am that at times. I don't like my place to be too minimalistic. So I'm always a crossover, a transitional crossover between minimalistic and maximalist. So choose the item that's going to make you happy. Do I sound like Marie Kondo? Choose the item that's
okay.
going to
Spark
make you
joy.
spark joy. Yeah. Choose the item that really means something to you and allow that item to be in that space. Anything else, if it's not going to work with the space, then you can let it go. It's crossover lah, half and half.
So is that there is hope. There is hope for those who want to convert. And still goes back to design. Okay, I'm wary of the time factor, so I'm just going to pose one more question to both of you. This one's a bit of a fun, open-ended one. Design trends come and go. So maybe you can name some of the timeless home design secrets that remain relevant despite of the changing trends.
Okay, let me try and share how I approach, because I read on trends and to understand what the zeitgeist of design, the design landscape is going on, but I don't design with trend in mind, right? Because again, like you said, timeless designs. So I try to design things that are more evergreen and more classic in the sense. But that being said, you know, I guess a tip that consumers can sort of try to approach. It's not an object or it's not a brand. It's an approach in designing. So how you can design a space without having to fear that it will look dated or it will not look fresh anymore. I have 3 points, if you don't mind me sharing.
Oh yes,
Okay?
of course, yeah.
So when you want to design a space, let's think of a space that you want to be comfortable in, but at the same time a space that you might want to accommodate guests. So it could be a living space, it could be a lounge, or it could be a dining area. So with this kind of spaces in mind, these are 3 ways that I think you can approach the design so that it will stand the test of time. Number 1 is have a clear sense of color palette. So have a clear sense of your color scheme to really lay the foundation of how this space will look like. So whether it's neutrals or whether it's a very mint sort of pinkish pastel color palette, or in fact something loud and broody and a bit more rustic. So whatever it is, have a clear sense of color scheme. Yeah? Number 2, dictate a focal point. And when I mean focal point, it could be a wall, it could be a big art piece, or it could be from the furniture aspect. Choose one armchair that's a bit more eccentric than the rest, or choose a coffee table that has a more striking material on it, like an onyx green stone, just to help contrast everything else and really help anchor the space. Right? So by doing so, you break the monotony of the space, right? And the last point is actually what Shini was talking about, artifacts. Introduce artifacts or art and culture into that space. So these are items from your travels. These are items that introduces your personality into the space.
Spark joy.
Yeah. So these are things that you find at vintage stores. It could be photos that you've taken before on your phone, print it out, frame it, and don't frame it from an IKEA frame. Like go to a framer, choose a frame that best suits your personality. It could be a minimal frame, it could be a very rustic frame, and then fill all the spaces or the like sort of corners in that space with these artifacts. So it really injects more of you and your personality into the space. So you have your color scheme that lays the foundation, you have a focal point that helps bring attention to one aspect of the space, and then you have artifacts to fill up the voids that injects personality into the space. So if you approach all your spaces with this, you would have a well-considered design interior.
Brilliant.
So
I think-
that's like a 15,000 consultation fee right there. But I'm just giving it out for free.
For free, guys, for free. And in summary as well, summarized into 3 concise points. Hey, Shini, do you have anything to add to that? Because I think, yeah.
I mean, I I mean, adding to whatever Cash said, I don't necessarily follow trends as well, but I'm also a sucker when it comes to injecting what is trending right now into
I guess
design.
what's relevant.
What's relevant to the design. There is a word that I always use in interior design, it's called transitional. Now, if I were to start designing, be it a moody rustic, be it a modern contemporary, I will apply the word transitional over there. Transitional is a design and a concept that you apply to the whole project, whereby it looks good in 10 years to come. Which means even if I'm going to do a minimalistic space, what is in that space that's still going to look 10 years to come, or you're able to choose and add on items into the space. So if you apply this concept called transitional, you can choose whatever design trend that you're going to, which is trending now or not even trending, that's still going to be working in 10 years to come. But at the end of the day, also adding to that, the clever way is keeping everything neutral. Because if you keep everything neutral, you're basically in the safe zone, which is basically back to you doing a transitional space.
So then I think what we can all learn is the timeless piece is not really a piece per se at all, compared to what we always think. Timeless is an approach. Thank you. You both summarized it really, really well. I'm sure there's the neutrals also. A lot of everyone echoed it. They really like neutrals. They really like minimalism. So I think those who are still sticking around with us, thank you so much for your time. And more importantly, thank you so much, Cash and Shini.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, for your really, really generous sharing. I think we learned a lot today. Being wary of the time, not sure if there's anyone present here who happens to have any questions. I think up there as well. Just now I saw people peeking from up there. So they just have a really good audio connection so they don't come down. But in case anyone has any questions, I'll just open it for maybe a minute just to look around. And if not, being wary of the time, I just want to thank you both again. That was indeed insightful sharing.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We
Yeah,
really
for having
learned a
us.
lot. I learned a lot. So I will speak on behalf of me and the other laymen. So thank you so much. That concludes our talk for today. If anyone else is still, still present, if you have some time, why not just leave a note if you haven't already? Perhaps you want to just catch Shini and Cash for a quick chat before they go. And if you leave a note, then you have a chance at the Gashapon machine. So why not as well? Sure, we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to glean from our experts today. So thank you so much once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.